Hey, Laura Mae, can you hear me? Okay, good. I hit a button. I wasn't sure if you could hear me or not. Hey, Pug. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. I'm going to wait a few minutes, give people time to get in. There's some new drama kicked off. Let's see if, give them just a few minutes. Let me send this out to some people. Everybody have a good day today? Yeah, there's always some kind of drama going on. Took my youngest out to eat and took her to Crumble, got her some birthday cookies. Now her sister and brother-in-law's taking her to the drive-in to see Obsession and something else. I can't remember the other movie, but they're going to watch 2 movies, so. Good way to end her birthday weekend. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's hard to believe my baby's 15. They were making fun of my moon the other night. They were laughing about it. I said, well, I could have been a dancing pickle. "23. My oldest, she'll be 22 in 2 weeks. The funny thing is, both of them, their original due dates were July 4th. I don't know how I managed original due dates at the same day, 7 years apart, but I did. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. We're going to give everybody just a few more minutes, then we'll get started on chapter 5. And we'll read up to chapter 13. And, hey, Salem. If anybody wants to come up on panel, you're more than welcome to. Hey, Pam. When we get done here, Pam will be finishing the book tonight from chapter 14 to the end of the book. And I'm going to do chapter 5 to 13. And then tomorrow at 3 p.m., Pam's got a special guest coming to her live, and I encourage y'all to come and be a part of that tomorrow. Oh man, I'm gonna have to get up. Yeah, we had several people come in late, so I figured I'd go ahead and recap for everybody. And I saw you kept falling asleep, and I thought, well, might as well recap for some people so they'll be caught up with Pam tonight. And I don't mind. Yes, make sure y'all send your heart me's to collect your points if you can. If you can't, it's okay. And be sure you're tapping so we can protect the live. Thank you.
Everybody share this out so we can get as many people in here as we can that missed some from last night or what have you.
Some of them may be caught up in them lives, got stuff going on. They may come in a little bit. Okay. It was good. Took we took my young one out for her birthday.
Faggot.
Excuse me? You're gone. Okay. We took the youngest one to Jefferson's to eat for her birthday, and we went to Crumble and got her some birthday cookies. Now they're gone. I know. What was that? To Crumble. Well, they went to the drive-in now to see Obsession and another movie. I don't know what the other one is.
My niece is taking my daughter tomorrow to see the new Toy Story. My daughter is 20 years old. My niece is in her 30s, and they're going to go see the Toy Story.
I want to see it because it's got Bad Bunny in it. He's the pizza. Hey, Junebug. Hey, True Sayer. So it's good. I like the original Toy Story. I hadn't seen the other one, but it's got my Bad Bunny in it, so I want to see it just because he's in it. His voice, anyway. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. They'll come in when they're done, I guess. All right, Chapter 5, Fame After Blood. When Gypsy Rose Blanchard walked out of prison on December 28, 2023, she did not step quietly into private life. She stepped into an audience. The cameras were already waiting. The interviews were already lined up. The public already knew her face, her voice, her version of events, and the shape of the story she had spent years telling from behind prison walls. For most convicted people, release means rebuilding in silence. For Gypsy, release became a launch. Within days, she was not simply a woman who had served time for her role in her mother's murder. She was a personality, a brand, a social media figure, a headline machine. That is what makes the aftermath so disturbing. Dee Dee Blanchard was dead. Nicholas Godejohn was serving life in prison. The little pink house had become part of true crime folklore. Yet the surviving daughter at the center of the case moved almost immediately into interviews, social platforms, book promotions, television specials, reality programming, and viral online attention. Timing alone is hard to ignore. While still connected to the prison system and preparing for release, Gypsy announced an ebook titled Released: Conversations on the Eve of Freedom. After release, she also moved towards a full memoir, My Time to Stand, scheduled for publication through Ben Bella Books, with an audio edition by Recorded Books. In publishing terms, this was not casual reflection. It was a commercial product built around a murder case, a prison sentence, and the public fascination surrounding both. The exact amount Gypsy received from book deals has not been publicly confirmed. That matters. No responsible writer should invent a number and present it as facts. But the earning potential is obvious. A public figure with millions of followers, national media attention, a lifetime series, viral name recognition, and an already famous criminal case can earn money in several ways at once. Book advances, audio rights, television participation, interview opportunities, social media, monetization, sponsorships, appearance fees, affiliate links, and creator revenue can all become part of the same machine. Even modest estimates become significant. If a memoir sold 50,000 copies at a retail price of around $28, that would represent $1.4 million in gross retail sales. If the author's royalty averaged 10% of that retail, that would be about $140,000 before agent fees, taxes, and any division with co-writers or publishers. If it sold 100,000 copies, the same rough model would suggest around $280,000 in potential author royalties. If it sold 200,000 copies, the figure could approach $560,000. Those numbers are not confirmed earnings. They are only a basic publishing estimate to show why a famous true crime memoir can become financially powerful very quickly. That is before social media. At one point after her release, Gypsy's Instagram following was reported in the millions, with public summaries placing it at about 7.8 million before she deleted accounts during a short retreat from the spotlight. Other reports described her gaining major followings across TikTok, Instagram, X, and Snapchat. Even if creator fund payments are often small, brand deals and sponsored posts can be far more lucrative for accounts with massive reach. A creator with millions of followers can potentially charge thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for a sponsored post, depending on engagement, platform, audience, and brand fit. Again, the exact numbers are not public, but the possibility is the point. A homicide became a platform, a dead woman became the backstory, and the daughter who helped arrange her murder became marketable. There is something morally nauseating about that. It is not simply that Gypsy had social media accounts. People leaving prison are allowed to speak, work, write, and rebuild. The issue is the tone. The issue is the speed. The issue is the way a case involving the stabbing death of her own mother was absorbed into influencer culture with astounding ease. TikTok dances, get ready with me videos, food tasting clips, trend participation, relationship drama, comment replies, beauty content, soft lighting, playful captions, smiling camera angles, viral sounds. The whole thing began to feel less like reintegration and more like performance. For some viewers, Gypsy's online persona seemed strangely childish. That alone might not be remarkable given her unusual life history, developmental issues, and years in prison, but paired with the subject matter of her fame, the effect became unsettling. She was not famous for music, she was not famous for comedy, she was not famous for acting. She was famous because her mother was murdered and because she pled guilty to second-degree murder. That is the fact every trend has to sit beside. A dance is not just a dance when the person dancing became famous through matricide. A joke is not just a joke when the punchline keeps circling back to a dead mother. A casual video is not just it's not just casual when the audience includes people who treat a homicide case like fandom. Then came the TikTok controversy that made many people stop pretending nothing was wrong. In March 2026, Cee Cee appeared in a video connected to the We Listen and We Don't Judge trend with influencer Natalie Reynolds. Reporting described the video as referencing the killing of Dee Dee. In the clip, Cee Cee was criticized for making a joke about the crime, with public backlash calling it sick and disturbing. Entertainment Weekly reported that she later responded by saying, "It wasn't received like we wanted." That response says a lot. Not because every person must grieve publicly in the same way, not because people who have endured complicated trauma are forbidden from dark humor, but because Dee Dee was not an abstract subject. Dee Dee was her mother. Dee Dee was the woman found dead in bed. Dee Dee was the victim of the crime Cee Cee admitted helping commit. To joke publicly about the killing of your mother is not merely poor taste. It is chilling. And for many people who had once supported Cee Cee, that moment cracked the image completely. The woman they had been told was remorseful, healing, and trying to use her platform responsibly appeared instead to be playing with the very act that ended Dee Dee's life. There is no way to make that dignified. This is where the reader has to ask what remorse is supposed to look like. It does not have to look like permanent silence. It does not have to look like self-hatred. It does not have to mean never smiling again, but surely it should involve some visible awareness that another human being lost her life. Surely it should involve restraint. Surely it should involve the understanding that a murdered mother is not material for trends. Dee Dee cannot make a TikTok. Dee Dee cannot write a memoir. Dee Dee cannot go live, tell her side, correct the record, cry for the camera, or explain what she felt in the final years of her life. Cee Cee can, and she has. The imbalance is the central cruelty of the aftermath. The dead mother is silent. The daughter who helped plan the murder controls the microphone. Her relationships become content too. While still in prison, Cee Cee married Ryan Scott Anderson in July 2022. Public reporting described Ryan as a Louisiana special education teacher who began writing to her while she was incarcerated. After her release, the marriage became part of the public spectacle. Cameras followed, interviews followed, online commentary followed. Then only a few months after release, the marriage collapsed. By April 2024, Cee Cee had filed for divorce. By the end of that year, the divorce was finalized. Ryan became another character in the expanding show. The public watched him move from husband to obstacle to ex-husband as Cee Cee's story shifted again. Soon, attention turned to Ken Urker, a former prison pen pal and ex-fiancé with whom Cee Cee reconnected after separating from Ryan. Public reports later confirmed that Cee Cee and Ken were expecting a child together. This kind of rapid emotional movement may be explainable in many ways. Prison relationships are strange. Fame distorts everything. People leave confinement often struggle with identity and stability. But from the outside, the patterns still looked chaotic and self-serving. Men appeared, disappeared, reappeared, and became part of the storyline. The relationships fed the drama, and the drama fed the attention. Ryan, in particular, seemed to become useful until he wasn't. That is not a legal conclusion. It is a public interpretation many viewers reached while watching the post-prison spectacle unfold. He had written to her in prison, married her while she was incarcerated, stood beside her after release, and then almost immediately became part of a messy public breakup. In a quieter life that might have remained private pain, in Gypsy's world, it became content. That word keeps returning, content. The murder was content. The release was content. The marriage was content. The divorce was content. The pregnancy was content. The apology videos were content. The backlash was content. Even criticism seemed to keep the machine alive, and social media rewarded it. That is why the childishness of some videos matter. The dances, trends, food clips, makeup videos, and casual influencer formats do not exist in isolation. They exist on platforms where young viewers are present and where personalities become product. When a person known for a murder case uses playful trends, innuendos, relationship drama, and soft influencer aesthetics to build attention, the audience can easily include teenagers and children who are not equipped to understand the moral gravity of the case. That is deeply concerning, not because Gypsy is responsible for every person who watches her videos, but because she knows why she is famous. She knows the origin of the attention. She knows her name is tied to the death of Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard. The more she packages herself like a fun, quirky online personality, the easier it becomes for younger viewers to forget what made her famous in the first place. That is how true crime becomes fandom. The victim disappears. The convicted person becomes relatable. The algorithm places grief with engagement. And Dee Dee Blanchard once again is reduced to the obstacle in someone else's redemption story. The saddest part is not only that Gypsy built a public life after prison, it is that the public allowed the life to be built on Dee Dee's grave while still insisting Dee Dee was the only manipulator in the story. Look at the pattern. Gypsy participated in a murder plot. Gypsy accepted a plea deal. Gypsy left prison to national attention. Gypsy promoted books. Gypsy appeared in television projects. Gypsy built enormous social media followings. Gypsy entered and exited relationships in public view. Gypsy joined trends. Gypsy made jokes that many people understood as references to killing her mother. And through it all, Dee Dee remained the one people were encouraged to hate. That is not justice. That is branding. A mother was stabbed to death in her sleep. Her daughter became famous. The public bought the story, watched the shows, followed the accounts, clicked the clips, debated the men, judged the outfits, tracked the pregnancy, and turned a homicide into an entertainment universe. This chapter is not arguing that Gypsy should never speak. It is arguing that what she has done with the microphone deserves scrutiny. Because remorse is not proven by saying the right words in a controlled interview. Remorse is revealed in patterns, in restraint, in dignity, in what a person refuses to monetize, in what a person refuses to joke about, and whether the dead are treated as human beings or as a plot device. Dee Dee Blanchard had no choice to become a brand. She had no chance to explain herself after death. She had no chance to defend her medical decisions, no fears. She had no chance to defend her medical decisions, her fears, her mistakes, or her love. Gypsy did. And instead of stepping carefully, quietly, and humbly around the memory of the woman whose death made her famous, she stepped into the algorithm. That may be legal. It may even be profitable. but it is not beautiful, and it is not remorse. And that's the end of chapter 5. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Let me get a little bit of drink. All right. Chapter 6 is Romance as Performance. Gypsy Rose Blanchard's relationships did not remain private after prison. They became part of the product. The public watched her leave prison as a married woman. It watched her stand beside Ryan Anderson. It watched the smiling photos, the interviews, the awkward closeness, the sudden distance, the separation, the divorce, and then the return of another man from her past. In any ordinary life, a failed marriage and a new relationship might be painful, but private. In Gypsy's case, it became another storyline attached to the death of her mother. That is what makes the pattern so hard to ignore. Ryan Anderson entered the story while Gypsy was incarcerated. He wrote to her in prison. He married her in 2022 while she was still serving her sentence for second-degree murder. When she was released in December 2023, he was there as the husband, the man waiting outside the prison, years after the crime that made her famous. For a brief moment, he looked like a part of Gypsy's reinvention. Then he became part of the mess. Only months after her release, the marriage collapsed publicly. Gypsy moved back in with her family, announced the separation, and filed for divorce. Soon after, attention turned towards Ken Urker, a former prison pen pal and ex-fiancé with whom she had reconnected. The transition was fast enough to unsettle many viewers. It was not simply a woman leaving an unhappy marriage. It was a convicted daughter at the center of a famous murder case, moving through relationships under cameras, headlines, comments, and reality television editing. Ryan became useful until he was not. That is not a legal statement. It is an interpretation of the public pattern. He wrote to her in prison. He married her before release. He became part of the post-prison story. Then almost immediately, he became the ex-husband in a new chapter built around another man. The drama did not slow down. It grew. Ken Urker had also entered Gypsy's life through prison correspondence. He and Gypsy had been engaged before, split, and later reconnected after her separation from Ryan. Public reporting later confirmed that Gypsy and Ken were expecting a child together. Their daughter, Aurora, was born December 2024. By then, Gypsy's private life had become a rolling public spectacle. Marriage, separation, divorce, reconnection, pregnancy, paternity headlines, reality television, social media updates, public statements, fan debate, critics, supporters, comment sections, everything fed the machine. The paternity issue became another headline because Louisiana law can presume a husband to be the legal father of a child born within a certain period around divorce. Gypsy took a pre-birth paternity test to show Ken was the father. In a quiet life, that might have been handled privately with lawyers. In Gypsy's world, it became another piece of public content. Another update, another conversation, another reason for people to keep watching. That is the strange rhythm of her post-prison life. Nothing seems allowed to stay still. The problem is not that Gypsy has relationships. The problem is the way those relationships become entertainment while Dee Dee remains voiceless in the background of the fame that made all of it possible. Gypsy's romantic life is not famous because she is an actress, musician, athlete, or artist. It is famous because her mother was murdered and because Gypsy pled guilty for her part in the killing. The fact should make everything quieter. Instead, it has made everything louder. Her online persona has also raised concerns because so much of it seems designed for attention through intimacy, innuendos, flirtation, and performance. The public has seen her lean into beauty content, relationship drama, playful captions, suggestive humor, and reality-style emotional confessions. Some of it would be unremarkable from a normal influencer. From Cee Cee, it lands different. Because her platform was built on a homicide. That is not moral nitpicking, it is context. A person made famous through the murder of her mother cannot simply behave like every other influencer without the shadow of that crime following every clip. A flirtatious joke is not just a flirtatious joke when the person making it first became famous through a case involving manipulation, secret online relationships, violent role play, and a planned killing. A relationship update is not just a relationship update when it is sold to an audience that first gathered around a dead woman. The older evidence makes the modern persona even more disturbing. Before the murder, Cee Cee and Nicholas Goldenjohn's relationship included online role play, fantasy identities, sexualized videos, and discussions that prosecutors later used to show planning, influence, and intent. More than 100 videos reportedly exchanged between Cee Cee and Goldenjohn later became part of renewed public scrutiny after release through FOIA-related discussions and podcast coverage. One alleged video is especially troubling. In reporting about the released clips, Cee Cee is described as speaking to Goldenjohn in a fantasy context about future children. The reported content included a statement that if they had a daughter, the child would eventually have to be sexually initiated by Goldenjohn because he would be the master of the household, with the age discussed as 13 years old. There is no gentle way to frame that. It is vile. It also matters because Cee Cee is now the mother of a daughter. That does not mean her child is in danger. It does not mean any accusation should be made about her parenting without evidence. But it does mean the public has every right to question the judgment, fantasy life, and sexual boundaries of a woman who allegedly recorded that kind of statement before participating in the murder of her mother. Some supporters will say it was role play. That explanation does not make it disappear. Role play can reveal fantasies, power dynamics, emotional control, and manipulation. It can also be used to test what another person will accept. In Cee Cee and Nicholas's case, the role play was not isolated from reality. Their private fantasy world eventually collided with a real bedroom, a real knife, a real victim, and Dee Dee Blanchard's real body. That is why the old videos cannot be dismissed as embarrassing private nonsense. They were part of the relationship ecosystem that led to murder. Nicholas Goldenjohn was later described in court in appeal-related reporting as autistic, socially limited, and psychologically vulnerable. His defense argued that Cee Cee's role-play videos and messages influenced him. He was not absolved. He was convicted and sentenced to life, but his vulnerability still mattered when examining Cee Cee's pattern with men. The public image often casts Cee Cee as someone acted upon by others. The record repeatedly shows her acting on others. With Nicholas, she participated in a secret relationship that grew into murder planning. With Ryan, she married from prison and entered release with a ready-made husband beside her. With Ken, she returned to an old prison romance almost immediately after the marriage with Ryan collapsed. Again and again, men appear inside her story as emotional support, plot devices, protectors, or public partners. And each time, the story continues to center around Cee Cee. Dee Dee disappears further. That is the cruelty of the spectacle. Dee Dee is the reason the public knows these names, but she is not allowed to participate in the conversation. She cannot speak about Nicholas. She cannot speak about Ryan. She cannot speak about Ken. She cannot speak about the videos, the fantasies, the relationship secrecy, the lies, the planning, or the daughter now being raised in the glare of the same fame that grew from her death. She is only the dead mother. Gypsy is the continuing series. The relationship saga also raises a larger concern about audience. Gypsy's social media presence includes the kind of playful, trendy, sometimes childish content that easily reaches younger viewers. TikTok dances, casual videos, beauty posts, relationship clips, baby updates, and soft influencer content are formats consumed heavily by teenagers and children. When those formats are used by someone famous because of a matricide case, the moral lines blur quickly. Young viewers may not understand the weight of the crime. They may only see a quirky woman with drama, makeup, boyfriends, baby content, and a tragic backstory. That is dangerous. It turns homicide into personality content. It turns a guilty plea into a brand origin story. It turns Dee Dee Blanchard into the dark chapter Gypsy gets to overcome on camera. And now that Gypsy has a daughter, the question becomes even more sensitive. A child should not be punished for the actions of a parent. Aurora deserves privacy, safety, and a life not defined by internet obsession. But the public circumstances around her birth are already tied to fame, paternity headlines, reality TV, and a mother whose past includes deeply disturbing alleged statements about a hypothetical daughter in the context of sexualized role play. That is not something serious readers can ignore. It is not hate to ask whether the public should be more cautious. It is not cruelty to say a convicted person who helped plan her mother's murder should not be treated as harmless entertainment. It is not unfair to ask whether Gypsy's content, performance, relationship chaos, and willingness to convert intimate life into content reveals something troubling about her relationship to attention. Because attention has been present from the beginning. Attention through illness, attention through charity, attention through secret relationships, attention through the murder case, attention through prison interviews, attention through release, attention through men, attention through pregnancy, attention through motherhood, attention through backlash. It is a pattern, and patterns matter. Dee Dee Blanchard's name is often dragged through the mud as if every strange or unhealthy thing in the story began and ended with her. But Gypsy's own adult behavior deserves scrutiny too. Her post-prison life did not show a quiet woman overcome with remorse and determined to live carefully outside the spotlight. It showed someone stepping repeatedly into the brightest possible light, bringing her romances, body, jokes, pregnancy, and conflicts with her. The result is deeply uncomfortable. A murdered mother remains silent. Her daughter dances through the algorithm. Her relationships become plot lines. Her child becomes public fascination. Her old role-play videos resurface with language so disturbing it should make every viewer stop cold. And somehow, the public is still asked to see Dee Dee as the only dangerous woman in the story. That is not balance. That is Brandon. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. Any questions so far?
No, you're doing lovely, my girl.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, I love it.
Thank you for reading it.
You're running a close race with Pammy.
I'm trying to catch everybody up for Pam.
You are great ladies. Wonderful.
I'm playing catch up for the ones that missed it last night for whatever reason, so they can be there for Pam's tonight.
Yes, do not forget Pam's live, guys.
Yes.
And Becca was good to have Liam up there. That was awesome exposure for him.
That's great.
That is amazing.
Great. I heard a little bit of it on a replay or something earlier. And somebody else's live, or they were playing it as he was doing it. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, let's don't keep the chat waiting.
All right. Chapter 7, The story she hid in plain sight. Okay, let me put my glasses on. It'll be easier to read. I'm squinting. All right, chapter 7. The story she hid in plain sight. One of the hardest parts of the Blanchard case is not simply what Gypsy Rose said after Dee Dee was dead. It's what she knew before. For years, the public was encouraged to picture Gypsy as someone with almost no control over her own life. She was presented as childlike, trapped, isolated, medically helpless, and unaware of the world beyond her mother. That image became one of the emotional foundations of the case. If Gypsy was helpless, then Dee Dee became absolute. If Dee Dee was absolute, then every lie became Dee Dee's lie. Every performance became Dee Dee's performance. Every medical contradiction became Dee Dee's fault alone. But the records and public reporting suggest something more complicated. Gypsy knew she could walk. Gypsy knew she could eat solid food. Gypsy had secret online relationships. She had hidden accounts. Gypsy met men without Dee Dee's knowledge. Gypsy maintained private lives while publicly allowing the world to see her as far more helpless than she actually was. That does not mean Dee Dee made no mistakes. It does not mean the home was healthy. It does not mean every medical decision was perfect. But it does make the simple public story harder to accept, because Gypsy was not merely being seen. She was also performing. The doctor most often connected to the medical doubts in this case is Dr. Bernard Fletcherstein, a pediatric neurologist in Springfield. In 2007, he examined Gypsy and became suspicious of the muscular dystrophy story. He ordered testing, including MRIs and blood work, and the results did not support the diagnosis Dee Dee had reportedly described. After observing Gypsy stand and support her own weight, he told Dee Dee, "I don't see any reason why she doesn't walk." That quote has often been used against Dee Dee. But there's another way to read it. If Gypsy could stand and support herself in front of a doctor, then Gypsy was not completely unaware of the performance. She knew what her body could do. Later reporting stated that Gypsy herself acknowledged she knew she could walk and eat solid food, even while continuing with the public image of severe illness. That matters. It matters because the mainstream version depends heavily on Gypsy being passive, a child in a chair, a girl without agency, a daughter so controlled that she had no meaningful role in the story until she escaped through murder. But knowing you can walk is not nothing. Knowing you can eat is not nothing. Maintaining the opposite impression in public is not nothing. There is also disputed medical record claims circulating in FOIA communities that doctors suspected Gypsy of not fully cooperating with certain tests, including hearing-related evaluations. This book does not state those claims as fact without the original medical notes, but if those records are included in the final source file, they deserve serious attention because they would support a larger pattern already visible elsewhere. Gypsy's public helplessness did not always match private reality. The verified pattern is already troubling enough. Gypsy's own later statements complicated her image. She told BuzzFeed she believed Dee Dee's claims that she had cancer, but the same reporting also summarized that she knew she could walk and eat solid food. That is the contradiction at the heart of the case. She may have believed some things. She may have also known others were false. Both can be true. And if both are true, then Dee Dee should not be made to carry every deception alone. The public also heard constantly that Dee Dee isolated Gypsy from the world, but Gypsy's own actions show repeated private access to people beyond her mother. She used the internet. She created hidden accounts. She entered online relationships. She met men. She developed fantasy identities. She later built the relationship with Nicholas Godejohn. that would end with Dee Dee being stabbed to death in her bed. That is not isolation in the absolute sense people were sold. That is concealment. In 2011, the 2011 Science Fiction Convention incident is one of the clearest examples. Public summaries describe Gypsy meeting a man named Dan online and arranging to meet him at a convention. Accounts differ about details, but the core event is consistent. Gypsy was found with an adult man after trying to connect with him outside Dee Dee's supervision. Some accounts describe the man as being around 35. Other online claims describe Gypsy pursuing older men in their 40s or 50s. But those broader claims need direct source documentation before they should be stated as fact. The documented Dan incident is enough. It shows Gypsy was not simply sitting in a house with no access to the outside world. She was online. She was seeking men. She was arranging contact. She was experimenting with identity, sexuality, escape, and secrecy. And Dee Dee, in that moment, became the villain again. The public version says Dee Dee stopped Gypsy from having a normal relationship. But there is another uncomfortable fact. If Dee Dee believed Gypsy was developmentally vulnerable, medically complicated, or emotionally immature, then finding her with a grown man would not simply look like romance. It would look like danger. A mother walking into that situation might panic. A mother might overreact. A mother might become controlling. A mother might also be trying to protect her daughter from men who should have known better. That possibility rarely receives sympathy. It should, because Dee Dee was raising a child whose age, capacity, medical needs, and behavior were all tangled in ways outsiders barely understood. If Gypsy was secretly contacting older men, then Dee Dee's protectiveness may not have been simple cruelty. It may have been fear. Fear of exploitation, fear of losing control, fear of men taking advantage, fear of a daughter who was far more capable of secrecy than the public later wanted to admit. The same pattern continued with Nicholas Godejohn. Gypsy met him through a Christian dating site. Their relationship developed online over years. It included role play, fantasy personas, sexualized communication, and eventually discussions of murder. Court summaries and public reporting state that Godejohn traveled to Missouri after Gypsy sent him money for transportation, that Gypsy let him into the house, and that she gave him materials, including gloves and a knife. That is not the behavior of someone with no capacity to plan. It is the behavior of someone living two lives. One life was the public life, the wheelchair, the childlike voice, the charity image, the fragile daughter, the sweet little girl beside her devoted mother. The other life was hidden. Men, messages, accounts, fantasies, plans, lies. Dee Dee saw pieces of that hidden life, and according to the public story, responded with control. But what if some of that control was not born from pure malice? What if some of it came from watching Gypsy lie, sneak, manipulate, and disappear into situations Dee Dee did not understand and could not safely manage? This does not erase the questions about Dee Dee. It widens the frame, because a mother can be flawed and still frightened for a reason. A daughter can be vulnerable and still deceptive. A relationship can be unhealthy without making murder understandable. That is what the public narrative often refuses to hold. There are also claims from FOIA discussion communities that Dee Dee was not always blocking Gypsy from age-appropriate relationships and may have encouraged certain appropriate male friends or boyfriends to visit, spend time with Gypsy, or even join family activities. Those claims need direct publication of the relevant emails or records before I can formally provide them. But if accurate, They would seriously challenge one of the most repeated ideas in the case, that Dee Dee wanted Gypsy completely isolated from all romantic social contact. This book should include those records when they are obtained, because the question is important. Was Dee Dee stopping all relationships, or was she objecting to the dangerous ones? Was she controlling every contact, or trying to manage a daughter who was secretly seeking older men, hiding accounts, and lying about her life? Those are not the same thing. The differences matter. It matters because Dee Dee has been judged mostly through Gypsy's surviving version. Gypsy lived to explain herself. Gypsy lived to say what Dee Dee did. Gypsy lived to sit in interviews, write books, appear in documentaries, and frame her mother's behavior as abuse. Dee Dee did not live to explain what she found on computers. She did not live to explain what she feared about Dan. She did not live to explain what she knew about Nicholas. She did not live to explain whether she had discovered lies, accounts, messages, or men before the murder. She did not live to explain whether she believed her daughter was being exploited. She did not live to explain whether she had ever tried to allow appropriate relationships while drawing a line at unsafe ones. She was silenced, and silence is useful to the person still speaking. That is the grief inside this chapter. Not only that Dee Dee died, but that her death allowed other people to narrate her motives without resistance. The world was told Dee Dee hid Gypsy from life, but Gypsy had a hidden life. The world was told Dee Dee lied, but Gypsy lied too. The world was told Dee Dee controlled everything, but Gypsy was moving through secret digital spaces, secret romantic relationships, and eventually a murder plot her mother did not survive. The more closely the evidence is examined, the less Dee Dee looks like a cartoon monster, and the more she looks like a woman trapped inside a terrifying relationship with a daughter she cannot fully understand, fully control, or fully trust. That is a painful possibility. It is also one the public should not dismiss simply because the alternative story feels cleaner. There is a reason Gypsy's later behavior matters. Her post-prison life has shown continued performance, public contradictions, drama, attention-seeking, and shifting narratives. That does not prove every old accusation, but it makes it harder to treat her as a perfectly reliable narrator of Dee Dee's life. A person who lies in one era may lie in another. A person who performs helplessness in public may perform remorse in public. A person who secretly maintained relationships while presenting herself as a childlike dependent may also understand how to shape sympathy. This is not a diagnosis, it is a pattern, and patterns matter in true crime. Dee Dee Blanchard may have made mistakes. She may have been controlling. She may have mishandled parts of Gypsy's medical and emotional life, but the evidence of Gypsy's hidden behavior complicates every simple accusation made against her mother. Because if Gypsy knew more than she admitted, did more than she revealed, and hid more than the public was told, then Dee Dee was not merely the author of a deception. She may also have been its victim. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. Everybody good?
Yeah, your voice is soothing. I'm great. I love this.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
That was so
thinking it's
powerful
cracking.
how it points out that she may also have been the victim. Like she was caught up in all of it. Like, wow. This is so good. Keep reading.
Yes, yes.
Yes, just keep reading, Cee Cee.
All right. Chapter 8. The Woman Before the Accusations. Long before the world knew Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard as a villain, she was a girl from Louisiana. That part of the story is usually treated as background. A few lines, a date of birth, a hometown, a family tree. Then the narrative hurries forward to the accusations, the wheelchair, the doctors, the murder, the documentaries, and the prison interviews. But Dee Dee did not begin as a headline. She began as Claudine Petrie, born May 3, 1967 in Chicopee Bay, Louisiana, and raised in nearby Golden Meadows. She was one of several children born to Claude Anthony Petrie Sr. and Emma Louise Claire Petrie. The public record about her childhood is thin, and that matters. It means much of what people think they know about Dee Dee's early life comes not from diaries, school records, therapists, police files, or Dee Dee herself, but from people speaking about her after she was already dead. This is not a small problem. A dead woman cannot correct a memory. She cannot say that is not how it happened. She cannot point to what was left out. She cannot explain what it felt like to grow up in that house, what she feared, what she carried, what was expected of her, or what kind of girl she had been before everyone began searching her past for signs of future evil. After Dee Dee's death, family members described strained relationships in the Petrie household. Some relatives accused her of being deceptive or manipulative from a young age. Those claims have been repeated, often because they fit the later story people wanted to tell. If Dee Dee was strange as a child, then Dee Dee, the mother, becomes easier to condemn. If she was always difficult, always suspect, always wrong, then the murder can be placed inside a neat moral frame. But retrospective family claims are not the same thing as proof. That distinction is important. The public record itself acknowledged that some allegations about Dee Dee's early behavior were made after the fact and not fully substantiated by contemporaneous records. In plain language, that means people said things about her later, but the available record does not prove every claim from that time is supposedly happened. That does not mean every relative lied. It means readers should be cautious, because when someone dies in a notorious murder case, people around the story often begin rearranging memories. Old grudges sharpen. Embarrassments become evidence. Family tensions become prophecy. The dead person becomes easier to blame because she is no longer there to complicate the portrait. Dee Dee's family background was not presented to the public as neutral history. It was presented after her death, under the shadow of a murder, inside a media atmosphere that already needed her to be monstrous. That alone should make the readers slow down. Dee Dee's mother, Emma Louise Claire Petrie, died in 1997. Public summaries confirm the date, but the emotional reality behind it is harder to recover. Family accounts and later case discussions describe Dee Dee as having spent time in caregiving roles, both personally and professionally. She worked as a nurse aide in early adulthood, including alongside women who later became connected to the wider Blanchard family story. That work matters. A nurse aide is not glamorous work. It is intimate, difficult labor. It means bodies, medications, meals, bathing, lifting, cleaning, watching, waiting, and doing the kinds of tasks other people prefer not to see. It means becoming useful in rooms where people are vulnerable. For Dee Dee, caregiving was not an aesthetic she invented for cameras later. It was part of the life she had known before national attention ever found her. This is one of the quiet threads running through her story. Dee Dee was useful to people. Then people later used that usefulness against her. She cared for others, and later that care became suspicious. She learned medical language, and later that knowledge became sinister. She spent time around illness, dependencies, and bodily weakness, and later the public treated that familiarity as evidence of manipulation rather than survival. The same facts can be framed very differently depending on whether the storyteller wants sympathy or condemnation. Dee Dee rarely received sympathy. Family members later made other accusations too, including claims that she poisoned her stepmother, Laura, with weed killer. This accusation has appeared in public summaries of the case, usually as another piece of evidence used to darken Dee Dee's past. But again, the reader has to notice how the claim functions. It appears as family accusations. It appears after Dee Dee is no longer alive. It is repeated because it fits an already established image. This book does not ask the reader to blindly dismiss every accusation. It asks the reader to examine what is actually proven. Was there criminal convictions connected to that allegation? Was there contemporaneous finding that Dee Dee poisoned someone? Was Dee Dee ever able to answer the claim publicly? Or did the accusation become another posthumous brick in the wall built around her name? That is the problem with much of Dee Dee's early life narrative. The harsher the claim, the more useful it became to the monster story. The more useful it became, the less people seemed to ask whether it had been tested, documented, or fairly presented. The dead are easy to prosecute in public. They never object. There is also a deeper family pattern worth considering. Dee Dee's life did not appear to be surrounded by stable support. Public reporting about her later years with Gypsy described poverty, public housing, family estrangement, and periods of instability. A 2003 Slidell Century News article, later summarized in public case references, described Dee Dee and Gypsy as having been abandoned by family after Dee Dee's mother died. It said they had bounced around for years looking for affordable housing and had twice lived in their car before finding public housing in Slidell. That is the brutal sentence when allowed to sit on the page. Abandoned by family, living in a car. Hang on, I've got to do the puzzle.
Cee Cee, say the name of the book and his full last name. I know it's Ball something. Liam Ball.
The Woman They Made a Monster by The Woman They Made a Monster, the Dee Dee Blanchard Case by Liam Bossonette.
Austinette. Okay.
Yes.
I'll put it down in the chat here and there. Okay.
Okay.
They are very nice as well too. You go to their page and give them some good words and stuff like that. Share it
Yes.
out.
If you're not following him, please go to his TikTok page and follow him. He's very nice. Okay. That is a brutal sentence when allowed to sit on the page. Abandoned by family, living in a car, searching for affordable housing, trying to raise a medically complicated child. Those details do not match the image of an all-powerful manipulator surrounded by resources. They point to something bleaker. A woman with limited money, limited support, unstable housing, and a child whose medical issues brought doctors and assistance programs into the center of their lives. If Dee Dee was so protected by family, why was she living like this? If her relatives were so certain she was dangerous, why was she still left to manage Gypsy nearly alone? If everyone understood the truth so clearly after the murder, why was Dee Dee the one carrying the responsibility while she was alive? These questions are not excuses, they are context. The mainstream version often presents Dee Dee's relatives as truth-tellers who finally expose her after death, but the same record also suggests distance, conflict, and family breakdown long before the murder. That makes their later certainty complicated. Family members may know things outsiders do not. They may also carry resentment, guilt, shame, or a need to explain why they were not closer when everything fell apart. That is not an attack, it is human nature. When tragedy happens, survivors tell stories that make their own position bearable. Dee Dee did not survive to tell hers. The result is an imbalance that runs through this entire case. Gypsy lived to describe Dee Dee. Rod lived to describe Dee Dee. Christy lived to describe Dee Dee. Relatives lived to describe Dee Dee. Producers, journalists, police, doctors, neighbors, viewers, and internet commentators all described Dee Dee. Dee Dee did not get to describe herself. That silence became the shape of her reputation, and once the public decided what she was, even her childhood was searched for proof. A difficult girl became a future monster. A family conflict became a warning sign. A caregiving job became suspicious training. A poor mother seeking help became a fraudster. Every piece of her life was made to point towards guilt. But a life does not become evident simply because the ending was terrible. Dee Dee's early adulthood shows a woman familiar with work, care, illness, and dependency. She worked as a nurse's aide. She became a mother in an unstable relationship. Her marriage to Rod Blanchard quickly collapsed. She was left with the daily care of Gypsy. Later, she and Gypsy faced housing insecurity, public assistance, and displacement after Hurricane Katrina. By the time the world met Dee Dee, she had been surviving for years. That survival may not have been graceful. It may not have been healthy. It may have contained lies, fear, control, pride, and desperation. But it was still survival. There is a tendency in true crime to treat victims as though they must be morally spotless to deserve grief. Dee Dee does not fit that demand, and perhaps that is why the public found it so easy to discard her. She was complicated. She was accused. She was poor. She had family conflict. She had medical knowledge. She could be difficult. She did not leave behind a clean, angelic record. But dignity is not reserved for perfect people. A woman can be flawed and still be treated unfairly after death. A woman can be difficult and still be abandoned. A woman can be accused by relatives and still deserve scrutiny of those accusations. A woman can have made mistakes and still not deserve to be reduced to the worst version created by people speaking after she was gone. That is what this chapter asks the reader to hold. Not innocence, not sainthood, just caution. Because when a murdered woman's history is built largely from the words of people who outlived her, the question is not only what they said, it is what she never got to say back. Dee Dee Blanchard's childhood and family life remains partly hidden behind thin records and loud accusations. What can be seen clearly enough to matter? She came from a strained family system. She worked in caregiving. She lost her mother. She later experienced family abandonment, housing instability, poverty, and the crushing responsibility of raising a child with medical complications. That is not the beginning of a monster. It is the beginning of a tragedy. Okay, that's the end of that chapter.
Yeah, I really feel like this gives Dee Dee a little voice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It just, if we've all been here, and it's really gripping to finally hear somebody give her some dignity, do I want to say?
Yeah, I like the way he raises good points about it. All right, chapter 9, The Trial She Never Had. Gypsy Rose Blanchard never had to sit through the full public trial that Nicholas Godejohn faced. That fact matters. It matters because trials are where stories are tested, witnesses are questioned, timelines are pulled apart, messages are read aloud, contradictions are exposed, motives are challenged. The comfortable versions of a person does not always survive once the evidence is placed under lights. Nicholas Godejohn had that kind of trial. Gypsy did not. She accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 10 years. Nicholas went before a jury and was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action and received life in prison. That difference shaped the public memory of the case. Gypsy became the abused daughter who made a desperate mistake. Nicholas became the killer. Dee Dee became the monster. The arrangement was simple, useful, and easy for television to understand. But court records and case reporting show a far more deliberate story. Gypsy was not merely present around the murder. She helped create the conditions for it. She communicated with Nicholas before it happened. She stole money from Dee Dee to help him travel to Missouri. She let him into the house. She gave him gloves and a knife. Public case summaries state that the knife had been shoplifted from Walmart on the understanding that it would be used to kill Dee Dee. Then, when her mother slept, Gypsy hid in another room as Nicholas went into the bedroom and stabbed Dee Dee to death. The public often speaks as if Nicholas arrived like a force of nature. He did not. He was invited. He was funded. He was directed toward the house. He was given access. He was given tools. That does not make him innocent. He committed the physical murder and he was convicted for it. But it does make the popular division of blame feel far too neat. Nicholas became the hand. Gypsy was treated as the wound. Dee Dee was treated as the reason. The evidence suggests something colder. Before the murder, Gypsy and Nicholas had discussed killing Dee Dee for a long period. Public summaries of Gypsy's trial testimony state that she said they had been discussing killing Dee Dee for about a year. She also testified that she had plans A, B, and C to be with Nicholas. One plan involved pretending to meet him by chance at a movie theater while Dee Dee was present so the relationship could appear natural. When that failed, the path narrowed towards murder. This was not a single moment. It was not panic. It was not one bad night. It was planning. Less than a month before the killing, Gypsy reportedly sent Nicholas a video of herself walking into Dee Dee's room, pointing towards her mother's pillow and making a stabbing motion. It is difficult to imagine a clearer symbolic rehearsal. The room, the bed, the target, the gesture. That detail alone should have changed the way the public spoke about her. It rarely did. The mainstream version prefers Gypsy as a trapped daughter with no options. But no options does not explain a staged movie theater plan. It does not explain secret communications over a year. It does not explain stolen money for a bus ticket. It does not explain a knife and gloves. It does not explain a video pointing to the bed. Those details belong to a planner. After the murder, the behavior became even more revealing. Gypsy and Nicholas took more than $4,400 in cash from Dee Dee's home. They fled to a motel outside of Springfield and were recorded on security cameras at stores. Later, they traveled to Wisconsin. During that period, Dee Dee's body remained in the house. Then came the Facebook post. The post from Dee Dee and Gypsy's shared accounts were obscene, theatrical, and cruel. One said that bitch is dead, and another said, I effing slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet, innocent daughter. Her screams were so effing loud, LOL. They were not only shocking, they were useful. The post caused friends and neighbors to panic and contact police. They also helped investigators trace the activity to Wisconsin. Police case summary stated the IP data and account activity led law enforcement to Nicholas Godejohn's home, where Gypsy and Nicholas were found. That raises an uncomfortable question. Was Nicholas being positioned from the start to carry the visible blame? The posts were written in a way that sounded like a violent male intruder bragging about killing Dee Dee and assaulting Gypsy. The language made Gypsy appear to be the second victim. It pointed away from her and towards a monstrous male attacker. It created, in miniature, the same emotional story the public would later accept on a much larger scale. Dee Dee was dead, Gypsy was innocent, Nicholas was monstrous. Whether that was fully conscious strategy or chaotic panic, the effect was the same. The first public message after Dee Dee's death did not say help. It did not say my mother is dead. It did not say I was involved. It said something designed to horrify people and make them imagine Gypsy as a victim of Nicholas, too. That should matter. When police interviewed them separately, the split deepened. Public investigative summaries state that Gypsy initially told detectives Nicholas killed Dee Dee because Nicholas and Claudine did not get along. She described herself as forced into a situation and claimed she had been in the bathroom during the killing. Nicholas gave another version. According to case summaries, he admitted stabbing Dee Dee, but said Gypsy gave him the knife and gloves. He also reportedly said the idea to kill Claudine was Gypsy's and that he would not have killed her if Gypsy had not asked him to. That does not erase his responsibility, but it does expose the shape of the blame. Gypsy survived the murder and immediately had a story that placed Nicholas at the center. Nicholas admitted the physical act and pointed back to Gypsy as the origin of the plan. Dee Dee was dead and could say nothing. 3 people were inside the moral center of the case. Only 2 could speak. Only one would receive lasting public sympathy. Nicholas's own limitations also complicate the way blame settled. Public reporting around his trial and appeal state that his attorneys argued he had an IQ of 82 and was on the autism spectrum. Expert testimony in later proceedings discussed his social and cognitive vulnerabilities. Those arguments did not save him from conviction, but they matter when examining the relationship between him and Gypsy, because Gypsy was not dealing with a sophisticated criminal mastermind. She was dealing with a socially vulnerable man who had become deeply attached to her through online fantasy, sexual role play, and emotional dependency. His lawyer argued that he was susceptible to manipulation. Public summaries noted that prosecutors and experts recognized the unusual complexity of his state of mind, even while the jury still found him guilty. That is the part often left out. Nicholas was not excused, but Gypsy was softened. He became the obvious villain because he held the knife. She became the survivor because her story was easier to tell, yet the evidence showed that she was not simply acted upon. She acted. She requested. She planned. She facilitated. She concealed. Even Nicholas, before trial, described her as the mastermind and said all the planning, she did every bit of it. He also said she pretty much wielded the knife in my hand. Those are his words, and readers can judge them cautiously. A convicted murderer may try to shift blame, but his statement fits other evidence. It fits the messages, it fits the money, it fits the knife, it fits the gloves, it fits the hidden relationship. It fits Gypsy's own later testimony that she talked him into it. That phrase should never be forgotten. I talked him into it. Not he forced me, not I had no idea, not it was only his plan. I talked him into it. A plea deal meant Gypsy's full role was never examined before the public in the same way Nicholas's was. That is not a technicality. It is central to understanding why the public narrative became so one-sided. A trial might have forced more attention onto her messages, her lies, her sexualized role play, her planning, her attempts to shift blame, and her actions after the killing. Instead, the case resolved around the abuse narrative. That narrative may have contained truth. It may have contained pain, but it also had enormous value for Gypsy. It explained the murder. It reduced her punishment. It reshaped public opinion. It made Dee Dee alleged sins the emotional center of the story rather than Gypsy's choices. A dead woman was placed on trial without a defense. The The living daughter received the benefit of context. This is where the story becomes deeply unfair to Dee Dee. Dee Dee's conduct was examined through documentaries, interviews, family accusations, dramatizations, and social media speculation. Her worst alleged moments were repeated until they became identity. Meanwhile, Gypsy's role in the murder often softened by the language of survival. People said she escaped. People said she was desperate. People said there was no other way. But the evidence suggests there were other ways. Gypsy could walk. She had internet access. She had contacted men online. She had secret accounts. She had planned to meet Nicholas publicly. She had the ability to steal money, arrange travel, coordinate messages, and flee across state lines. She could bring a man into the home to kill her mother. If she could plan that, the claim that murder was the only possible exit deserves serious suspicion. The court system punished Gypsy, but the culture largely excused her. Nicholas received life. Dee Dee received posthumous hate. Gypsy received a platform. That is the imbalance this book keeps returning to. A sleeping woman was stabbed to death, and the public learned to treat the killing as a tragic but understandable ending to Dee Dee's supposed evil. Yet the documents show forethought. They show concealment. They show staging. They show a daughter who knew how to shape perception before and after the crime. The Facebook posts are especially important because they show the murder becoming narrative almost immediately. Before police found Dee Dee, the story was already being written online. The post made Nicholas look like the violent aggressor and Gypsy look like the innocent daughter. They created fear, shock, and urgency. They helped get the body discovered while also directing suspicion towards Wisconsin and the man behind the account activity. It was grotesque, it was effective, and it foreshadowed everything that came later. Because after the arrest, the story kept working the same way. Nicholas remained the visible killer, Gypsy remained the rescued daughter, Dee Dee remained the villain whose death people could process without grieving too deeply. That does not feel accidental. It feels like the first version of a strategy that continues for years. Blame Nicholas, condemn Dee Dee, protect Gypsy. The trial she never had might have complicated that strategy. Instead, the public got a plea deal, a documentary, a dramatized series, interviews, social media, and a simplified moral script. People learned the emotional, satisfying version before they learned the evidence. By the time details emerged, many had already chosen sides. That is why this chapter matters. It is not about proving Nicholas innocent. He was not. It's not about proving Dee Dee perfect. She was not. It is about refusing to pretend that Gypsy was merely carried along by events she helped set in motion. The evidence showed planning. The evidence showed awareness. The evidence shows blame shifting. The evidence shows a dead woman in bed and a daughter who knew far more than the public wanted to believe. Gypsy Rose Blanchard's guilty plea closed one legal door. It opened another one in the public memory. Because when a person avoids a full trial, the culture often fills the empty space with myth. In this case, the myth was simple. Gypsy survived. Gypsy survived Dee Dee. Nicholas killed Dee Dee, and Dee Dee deserved the blame. But simple is not the same as true, and Dee Dee Blanchard deserved better than to have the story of her death written by the people who survived it. And that's the end of that chapter.
That was a good sentence, though.
Cee Cee, you're doing great, honey. Get you a drink.
I
Laura
am.
made a cheerleader.
Sip that water.
Sip that water, sip that water.
And Pam was at where, 10, y'all?
No, Pam is on 14. She finishes
Oh,
up
Yeah,
tonight.
I'm on
I
10
fell
now.
asleep.
We're going into chapter 10, so I'll be done here shortly.
All
We're
right.
gonna go. We go to 13. Pam's gonna pick up 14 in the rest of the book.
Okay.
All right, chapter 10. After the knife. The hours after Dee Dee Blanchard's murder are some of the most revealing in the entire case, not because they are the most violent, because they are the coldest. A killing can be explained many ways by people desperate to understand it: panic, fear, rage, trauma, escape. A mind pushed past its limits. Those explanations have surrounded Gypsy Rose Blanchard for years, often softening the edges of what happened inside the Pink House in Springfield, Missouri. But after the knife, there was no immediate collapse into confession. There was movement. There was sex. There was stolen money. There was a motel. There was a bus. There was a wig. There was a weapon mailed away. There were Facebook posts so vile they seemed designed to turn Dee Dee's death into spectacle before her body had even been found. This is where the story became harder to excuse. According to public case summaries, after Nicholas Godejohn stabbed Dee Dee to death, he and Gypsy had X in Gypsy's room. Then they stole more than $4,400 in cash that Dee Dee had kept in the house. They called a taxi and fled to a motel outside of Springfield, where they stayed for several days while planning what to do next. That alone deserves to sit on the page. A woman was dead in her bedroom. Her daughter and the man who killed her were at a motel. The money was gone. The body remained undiscovered. This was not the image of a helpless girl staggering into daylight after surviving a nightmare. This was a pair of people moving through the aftermath of a killing with enough awareness to leave the house, take money, travel, shop, hide, and plan their next move. Security cameras reportedly captured them at stores during that period. Witnesses later saw Gypsy walking without assistance and wearing a blonde wig as she and Nicholas made their way toward the Greyhound station. The wig matters because it suggests concealment. A person wearing a disguise after a murder is not behaving as if nothing has happened. She is behaving as if she knows exactly why she should not be recognized. That is the detail so many popular retellings pass over too quickly. Gypsy could walk, she could travel, she could coordinate, she could hide. She could use a false image when it suited her. And after Dee Dee was dead, the illness performance disappeared fast enough for witnesses to see her walking on her own. There is also the weapon. Public case summaries state that Gypsy and Nicholas mailed the murder weapon back to Wisconsin so they would not be caught with it. That is not confusion. That is not shock. That is evidence of consciousness of guilt. It is an attempt to separate themselves physically from the object used to kill Dee Dee. A knife does not mail itself. Someone had to decide it should not remain with them. Someone had to package it. Someone had to send it. The aftermath shows thinking. It shows planning after the planning. It shows that the murder did not end in emotional collapse. It moved into logistics. Then there is the hotel video. In the video, reportedly recorded the day after the murder, Gypsy laughs while filming Nicholas eating a brownie and says, "He's eating a brownie, but later he'll be eating me." It is difficult to overstate how disturbing that sentence is in context. Dee Dee had just been stabbed to death. Her body was still in the home. People who loved her and knew her had not yet been given the dignity of knowing she was dead. And her daughter was laughing in a hotel room, making a sexual joke about the man who had just killed her mother. There are moments in the crime case that reveal something words after the fact cannot easily repair. That video was one of them. Later remorse can be claimed. Later explanations can be offered. Trauma language can be used. But the day after the murder, the available public summary does not describe Gypsy as shattered, horrified, or consumed by grief. It describes her laughing. That does not prove every thought inside her mind it does show behavior, and behavior matters. The Facebook post added another layer of cruelty. From Dee Dee and Gypsy's shared account came the words, "That bee is dead." Another post said, "I effing slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so effing loud, LOL." Those words were not merely disgusting. They served a purpose. They got attention. They frightened neighbors. They made people contact police. They also created an instant narrative. The writer sounded like a violent male attacker. Gypsy was framed as the sweet, innocent daughter, possibly assaulted and helpless. Dee Dee was mocked as dead and degraded before anyone had even stood over her body with official certainty. That is the first public story the killers released. Dee Dee is disposable, Gypsy is innocent, a man as the monster. The structure is almost too perfect. Public case summaries state that the posts were traced by IP data to Nicholas Godejohn's Wisconsin address, leading police to him and Gypsy. Some will argue the posts were foolish because they helped investigators find them. That may be true, but foolishness does not cancel cruelty, nor does it cancel the fact that the post shifted attention towards Nicholas and away from Gypsy in the first emotional moment of public discovery. The post made Dee Dee's death into a performance. They did not preserve her dignity. They did not seek help in a human way. They made a dead woman the target of a final humiliation. This is one of the most important parts of the case because it shows how quickly Dee Dee was dehumanized. Not by strangers online years later, not first by documentaries, not first by TikTok users, immediately by the people who had left her in that house. The public often wants to believe Gypsy was simply terrified, desperate, and incapable of processing what had happened, but the aftermath does not read that way cleanly. It reads as the movement away from the crime, concealment of evidence, sexualizing jokes, theft, travel, disguise, and online staging. Those are uncomfortable facts. They should be uncomfortable. The days after the murder also reveal the difference between grief and freedom. For many people, the death of a parent, even a complicated or abusive parent, produces shock, numbness, conflict, sorrow, confusion, or at least some visible recognition that a life has ended. Gypsy's documented behavior after Dee Dee's death instead appears in public summaries disturbingly light. She seems to believe that she has gotten away with it. She moved through public spaces with Nicholas. She stayed in a hotel. She left Missouri. She participated in the journey towards Wisconsin. That does not look like rescue. It looks like escape from accountability. And once she was caught, the story shifted again. Gypsy became the daughter people wanted to save. Nicholas became the killer people wanted to condemn. Dee Dee became the mother people were told not to mourn too much. The pattern began before the documentaries and never really stopped. The knife was melted away, but the narrative remained. Gypsy survived to explain herself. Nicholas survived to be blamed. Dee Dee did not survive to object. The imbalance is central to understanding the case. A dead woman's reputation was destroyed while living people shaped meaning around her absence. Dee Dee could not explain what happened before the murder. She could not describe her relationship with Gypsy in the final weeks. She could not tell police whether she felt afraid. She could not respond to claims that she had created every illness. She could not answer the daughter who helped bring a killer into her home. All she could do was lie where she had been left. The aftermath, where the reader must decide whether the popular story feels complete. If Gypsy was only helpless, why the disguise? If she was only panicked, why the stolen money? If she was only horrified, why the hotel joke? If she wanted help, why the obscene Facebook post? If she had no agency, why mail away the knife? None of those questions require speculation. They arise from the documented sequence itself. This does not mean Dee Dee was perfect. It does not erase the allegations surrounding her. It does not require the reader to deny dysfunction in the home, but it does require honesty about what happened after she died. And what happened after she died was not dignity. It was theft, travel, concealment, mockery, and storytelling. The saddest part is that Dee Dee's final public introduction to the world came through words meant to degrade her. Millions would eventually know her as a mother in the pink house, the woman accused of lying, the woman blamed for creating the situation that led to her own death. But before the public knew the full story, before the medical records, the court documents, and the documentaries, and the arguments, her death was announced in vulgarity. That B is dead, that was not justice. That was desecration. A society that cares about truth should not look away from that. It should not accept a softened version of the aftermath because the survivor later learned how to tell a more sympathetic story. The first story after the murder was already manipulative. It already selected roles. It already invited the world to see Dee Dee as less than human. That is why this chapter matters, because what people do after violence can reveal what they believe during it. After the knife, Gypsy did not call for help. She did not publicly confess. She did not protect her mother's dignity. She did not collapse beside the body. She left. She hid. She laughed. She helped make the dead woman into content. And years later, the world still struggles to admit what that says. And that's the end of that chapter.
Aw, you're doing good. Keep it up. Keep it up, Cee Cee. You're almost there, girlfriend.
All right.
And it's good. I mean, we're all just enthralled in it.
Yeah, it's really good. He did an excellent job. You
All
gotta give him
28 of
credit.
us are listening intently. Sorry, love.
You're good. You're good. All right. Chapter 11. Television made her innocent. All right. By the time many people formed an opinion about Dee Dee Blanchard, they had not read a court filing. They had watched a show. That is one of the most important facts in this case. Public memory was not built only from evidence. It was built from documentaries, dramatizations, interviews, podcasts, TikTok edits, YouTube essays, tabloid headlines, reality television, and the emotional power of seeing Gypsy Rose Blanchard presented again and again as the surviving daughter of an evil mother. The public did not simply learn the story. It consumed it. That makes a difference. A court document asks what can be proven. Television asks what can be felt. A courtroom slows a story down. Entertainment speeds it up. Evidence has limits. Drama does not. Once Dee Dee became a character, the audience no longer had to wonder what she might have said in her own defense. They already knew the role she had been assigned: mother, monster, captive keeper. The first major screen version to shape the public was HBO's Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. Released in 2017, the documentary examined the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard and focused heavily on the allegations that Dee Dee had medically abused Gypsy for years. It included interviews, interrogation footage, and a framing that helped introduce millions of viewers to the case through the emotional lens of Gypsy's survival. For many people, the documentary became the case. Not a version of the case. That is dangerous because documentaries can feel like evidence even when they are still edited narratives. A documentary decides what to show, what to leave out, when to cut, what music to use, what order to place the facts in, and which voice feels truthful. That does not make a documentary false. It does mean it should never replace the record. But with Dee Dee, it often did. Viewers saw the wheelchair, the shaved head, the medical claims, the charity photographs, the pink house, the daughter speaking from prison. They saw a story that looked complete because it felt complete. Dee Dee was not there to interrupt it. She was not there to explain the medical history. She was not there to describe what doctors had told her. She was not there to answer family members, producers, attorneys, or Gypsy herself. A dead woman became the subject of a documentary built largely around people who survived her. That imbalance shaped everything that followed. Then came the act. Hulu's dramatized series gave the case actors costumes, lighting, pacing, dialogue, close-ups, and emotional music. It gave the audience scenes no camera had actually captured. It gave private moments a script. It transformed real people into characters who could be understood in 8 episodes. That is powerful. It is also risky. The act was not a trial transcript. It was not a medical file. It was not Dee Dee's diary. It was a television drama based on a real case created to hold attention. That means it had to make the story emotionally legible. It had to make viewers feel the horror of Gypsy's position. It had to make Dee Dee frightening enough that the murder could be understood as the endpoint of unbearable control. Again, that does not mean every detail was invented. It means the emotional center was chosen. And the emotional center was not Dee Dee's humanity. The emotional center was Gypsy's suffering. Patricia Arquette and Joey King gave powerful performances. Critics praised the series. Audiences responded. But strong acting can become its own kind of evidence in the public's mind. A viewer may know intellectually that a scene is dramatized while still absorbing it emotionally as truth. A look, a silence, a tone of voice, a cruel line of dialogue, a staged medical scene, a frightened expression from Gypsy, all of it lingers. People remember what they felt. They forget what was proven. That is how entertainment quietly becomes testimony. Once the story moved through drama, Dee Dee became almost impossible to recover. The public had seen her as controlling. It had seen her through the camera's suspicion. It had felt the catastrophe of the house, claustrophobia of the house, sorry y'all. It had watched the daughter's desperation grow. By the time people later heard that Gypsy had a real chromosomal disorder that some produces, I'm getting tongue-tied, y'all. By the time people later heard that Gypsy had a real chromosomal disorder that some procedures may have been medically explained, that she knew she could walk, and that she had secret online relationships, that she planned with Nicholas for months, and that she admitted talking to him into it, many viewers were already emotionally convicted Dee Dee. Facts that arrived later had to fight a story that had already settled. That is not how justice should work. The problem grew worse after Gypsy's release from prison. Lifetime's Gypsy Rose, Life After Lockup, turned the aftermath into a continuing series. The focus shifted from murder to reinvention. Her marriage, divorce, relationship with Ken Urker, pregnancy, birth of her daughter, social media presence, public criticism, and attempts to build a new life became serialized content. Dee Dee remained dead. Gypsy became ongoing programming. That is an extraordinary thing to consider. A woman was murdered. Her daughter pled guilty to second-degree murder. The boyfriend who carried out the stabbing received life. Yet the daughter's life after prison became a reality docuseries. The public was invited to keep watching, not as jurors, not as readers of evidence, but as viewers following a personality. That changed the moral atmosphere. When someone appears repeatedly on television, audiences become familiar with them. Familiarity softens. A face seen often can begin to feel harmless. A person filmed crying, laughing, arguing, dating, parenting, and applying makeup becomes human to viewers in a way the victim often does not. Gypsy was given dimensionality. Dee Dee was largely fixed in a place as the past. She survived. That is the imbalance. Gypsy gets seasons. Dee Dee gets flashbacks. Gypsy gets confessionals. Dee Dee gets accusations. Gypsy gets motherhood arcs. Dee Dee gets the monster label. This is how media can quietly reverse the gravity of a homicide. The dead person becomes a plot device. The convicted person becomes the protagonist. The audience is asked to care about what happens next to the person who survived. Even when the person helped create the death at the center of the story, the effect is subtle but powerful. Viewers begin asking whether Gypsy will find love, whether she will adjust to fame. Will she stay married? Will she reunite with Ken? Whether she will become a good mother, whether she will handle backlash, whether she will grow. Those questions are not meaningless, but they will crowd out another. Those questions are not meaningless, but they crowd out another question. What was taken from Dee Dee? Dee Dee did not get a second act. She did not get posthumous reinvention. She did not get a camera following her through the years before the murder, asking what poverty had done to her, what caregiving had cost her, what she feared about Gypsy's health, what she knew about the hidden men, what she believed about the doctors, or how abandoned she felt by people who later had much to say. She got a role, and that role was villain. The rise of social media made the distortion even worse. On TikTok and Instagram, complex cases are reduced to seconds. A clip from an interview, a reaction face, a dramatic caption, a soundbite with medical abuse, a joke, a dance, a fan edit, a comment section filled with people who speak as if watching a dramatized series counts as research. The algorithm does not reward nuisance. It rewards certainty. So the easiest version wins. Dee Dee abused Gypsy. Gypsy escaped. Nicholas killed. Case closed. But case closed is not the same as truth found. The more simplified the story became, the more hatred Dee Dee received. People mocked her appearance. They celebrated her death. They repeated claims without checking them. They treated her ashes, being allegedly flushed, as if it were an appropriate punchline. They spoke of her as though her murder had been an understandable correction. That is what entertainment can do when it detaches sympathy from evidence. It makes cruelty feel righteous. The true crime industry often insists that it gives victims a voice, but in this case, the victim was often the person least protected by the narrative. Dee Dee's body created the genre interest, but Gypsy's survival created the market. The audience did not gather to mourn Dee Dee. It gathered to understand Gypsy. Then after release, it gathered to follow Gypsy. That is a very different thing. It is especially troubling because Gypsy's version has changed, expanded, and benefited from public attention. Her story gave her legal mitigation. It gave her media sympathy. It gave her followers. It gave her books, interviews, programming, and a platform. Dee Dee's story gave her nothing because Dee Dee was no longer alive. A living narrator can revise. A dead woman can only be revised by others. That should make readers cautious. It is not wrong to watch a documentary. It is not wrong to be moved by a dramatization. It is not wrong to believe that Gypsy experienced real harm, but it is wrong to let entertainment substitute for evidence. It is wrong to forget that a performance is not a court record. It is wrong to turn a murder victim into a villain so completely that her death becomes easier to consume. And that is what happened. Television did not literally declare Gypsy innocent. The law did not declare her innocent either. She pled guilty to second-degree murder, but television helped make her emotionally innocent in the public's imagination. It taught viewers how to feel. It framed the sympathy. It selected the villain. It gave the audience a story that could be watched, understood, and repeated without the discomfort of doubt. The emotional innocence became powerful. It followed Gypsy out of prison. It helped her become a public figure. It helped people interpret her jokes, relationships, contradictions, and online behavior through the softest possible lens. And it kept Dee Dee trapped forever in the harshest one. And that is why this book keeps returning to the same point. Dee Dee Blanchard does not have to be perfect to deserve fairness. She does not have to be innocent of every accusation to deserve humanity. She does not have to be saintly to deserve grief. She was murdered. That should have remained central. Instead, entertainment made the case about everything around the murder: the illness, the deception, the abuse narrative, the prison sentence, the release, the fame, the boyfriends, the baby, the brand. The woman in the bed became the background. That is the final danger of television in this case. It can make viewers feel informed while quietly teaching them what not to notice. Do not notice that Gypsy avoided a full public trial. Do not notice how much planning preceded the killing. Do not notice the Facebook posts. Do not notice the hotel video. Do not notice the knife mailed away. Do not notice the medical complications that make the story less simple. Do not notice the dead woman's silence. Just watch, feel, choose a side, then keep watching. That may be good television. It's not justice. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. All right, chapter 12. What remorse should look like. Remorse is not silence forever. It is not disappearing completely. It is not refusing to smile. It is not living every day with ashes in your mouth. A person can do wrong, serve time, leave prison, rebuild, work, love, parent, and still be genuinely sorry. But remorse has a shape. It has restraint. It has humility. It has an instinct to protect the dignity of the person who cannot speak anymore. That is what makes Gypsy Rose Blanchard's life after prison so difficult to watch. Not because she exists publicly, not because she gave interviews, not because she wrote books or tried to build a life. The problem is what her public behavior seems to reveal about the place Dee Dee Blanchard holds in her mind. A mother was murdered. That sentence should slow everything down. Yet after prison, Gypsy stepped into a world of cameras, social media, reality television, interviews, followers, relationship drama, influencer content, and viral trends. Time reported that after her release, she quickly established a social media presence across major platforms and announced an ebook tied to her release. Other reportings described millions of followers, deleted accounts, revived accounts, television appearances, and a reality series following her public life after prison. The machinery was immediate. It was not a quiet return. It was a rollout. That does not prove a lack of remorse by itself, but it creates the context for everything that followed. When someone is famous because of a homicide, every public choice carries the weight of that homicide. A dance is not just a dance. A joke is not just a joke. A relationship update is not just gossip. A trend is not just a trend. There is a dead woman underneath all of it. Dee Dee Blanchard cannot post a response. She cannot give a corrective interview. She cannot show family photographs from her side. She cannot explain how she saw her own life. She cannot clarify what happened inside the house. She cannot tell the public whether she was afraid of Gypsy. She cannot say what she knew about Nicholas Godejohn. She cannot defend her own medical decisions. Gypsy can speak. That makes Gypsy's choice matter more, not less. The most glaring example came with the backlash over her participation in the We Listen and We Don't Judge TikTok trend. Reports described Gypsy appearing to reference the killing of her mother in a light-hearted or joking way, with viewers criticizing the video as disturbing and inappropriate. Entertainment Weekly reported that she later said it wasn't received like we wanted. That phrase is revealing. Not because it proves what she felt privately. Nobody can see inside another person's conscience, but it suggests a concern with reception, with how the performance landed, with the audience response. The issue became how the video was received, when the deeper question should have been why it existed at all. Why turn the death of your mother into a trend? Why let the internet laugh anywhere near it? Why risk making a joke from the crime for which you went to prison? A remorseful person does not need to perform grief every day, but surely remorse should create boundaries. Surely there are things a person should refuse to turn into content. Surely the stabbing death of one's mother should sit beyond the reach of viral formats. If Gypsy was truly shattered by what happened, if she truly understood the gravity of what Didi lost, one would expect caution. Not perfection, caution. A carefulness around the subject, a refusal to make murder entertaining, an awareness that every joke lands on a grave. Instead, the public has seen a pattern that feels careless at best and cruel at worst. TikTok trends, reality television, relationship drama, baby headlines, social media cycles, deleted accounts, reappearing accounts, public explanations, backlash, apologies, more attention, always more attention. That is the hard thing to ignore. Attention runs through this story like a wire. Attention around illness, attention around charity, attention through secret relationships, attention through murder, attention through prison, attention through release, attention through social media, attention through men, attention through motherhood, attention through outrage. The form changes. The appetite does not seem to. Supporters often argue that Gypsy is simply learning how to live. That may be partly true. She spent years in prison. She had a strange childhood. Her development was affected by circumstances most people cannot imagine. But the explanation is not absolute. A difficult life does not make every public choice harmless. Trauma does not give someone a permanent license to trivialize another person's death, especially when the death is the reason the platform exists. The problem becomes even more devastating when placed beside the older evidence. Before the murder, Gypsy and Nicholas's relationship involved fantasy roles, sexualized messages, videos, and a private world in which violence and domination blurred with affection. Public case summaries described role-play identities, planning, and Nicholas's defense argued that Gypsy's messages and videos helped influence him. In that context, the later tendencies to perform online does not look random. It looks like an extension of a long pattern in which fantasy, audiences, sexuality, identity, and control become dangerously tangled. This is not saying every TikTok is criminal. It is saying the pattern deserves scrutiny. A person who helped plan a murder should understand the danger of performance. A person whose private fantasy life became connected to a real violence should be careful about turning life into clips and reactions. A person whose mother died in a crime A person whose mother died in a crime she's admitted participating in should know that some subjects are not material. Didi never got that protection. In life, she watched, judging, needed, criticized, and finally betrayed. In death, she became the raw material for other people's stories. First, the Facebook posts degraded her. Then, the documentaries explained her. Then, the drama series embodied her. Then, the social media machines. Sorry, my cat, not my phone. Okay. The social media machines mocked her, debated, simplified, and consumed her. Now even remorse became part of the performance. Gypsy can say she is sorry. She can speak of accountability. She can use the language of growth, but the reader has to ask whether the pattern supports the words. Remorse is not only what a person says in interviews, it is what they do when nobody is forcing them to be dignified. It is what they refuse to exploit. It is the line they will not cross for engagement. That is why the TikTok backlash mattered. It was not merely one bad clip. It was a moment that revealed how easily Dee Dee's death could still be handled as content by the person most responsible for treating it with seriousness. Some will say people are overreacting, but imagine Dee Dee as fully human for one moment. Imagine her not as the monster from television, not as the meme, not as the obstacle in Gypsy's redemption arc, but as a woman in her bed, a mother, a caregiver, a person with a childhood, a body, fears, memories, medical problems, habits, laughter, flaws, and private thoughts no documentary ever recovered. Then imagine her daughter, years later, smiling into a camera while a trend circles the subject of her death. The discomfort is not irrational, it is moral. That does not mean the public should harass Gypsy. It does not mean anyone should threaten her or her family. It does not mean she has no right to rebuild her life. But rebuilding is not the same as branding. Healing is not the same as monetizing. Accountability is not the same as turning matricide into a reoccurring subplot. There is a difference between surviving and selling. There is a difference between moving forward and performing forward. There is a difference between remorse and reputation management. The public should be honest enough to see that difference. Dee Dee Blanchard was denied the dignity of being heard after her death. If Gypsy had wanted to honor even the smallest part of that lost dignity, she could have chosen a quieter path. She could have spoken carefully, rarely, and soberly about the murder. She could have refused to participate in trends that touched it. She could have drawn a harder line between rebuilding her life and entertaining an audience with the crime that ended her mother's. Instead, the line was blurred again and again. That blurring is what this chapter names. That not as a legal argument, but as a moral one. If remorse is real, it should make a person careful with the dead. And Gypsy Rose Blanchard has not always been careful with Dee Dee. Okay, that's the end of that chapter.
One more to go, right?
One more.
And then we let
13.
Pam finish it up.
Yeah.
Y'all gotta give me an intermission though.
Yeah, there'll be time. She starts at 9:30, I believe.
Okay.
Well, it's 9:36 for us right now.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Okay.
Ooh, we got over 100K. Good job, lady. Look at that.
Thank you, ladies and gents.
All right.
In
Good
here.
job.
Good job.
Girls.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Okay, I'll read this chapter real quick and then we'll go to Pam's.
Love you.
All right. All right. Chapter 13, the blanket video. The blanket was not the most interesting part of the video. The camera was. Most emotional outbursts happen privately. Most people experiencing genuine frustration do not stop to consider lighting, framing, or recording equipment. That reality led some critics to focus less on the destruction of the blanket and more on the circumstances surrounding the recording itself. The question they asked was simple: why was a camera already there? Publicly available information does not fully answer that question. However, the existence of the footage created speculation among viewers who believed the event reflected something larger than a spontaneous emotional reaction. To these observers, the video appeared unusually performative. They argued that the emotional display seemed directed not only toward the person involved in the argument, but also towards a future audience. Whether the interpretation is correct remains open to debate, yet it raises an important question that appears repeatedly throughout Gypsy Rose's story: the relationship between emotion and performance. Critics have long argued that many of Gypsy's most significant public moments involve an awareness of audience reaction. Supporters reject this characterization and view such accusations as unfair attempts to reinterpret normal human behavior through the lens of a notorious crime. The blanket video became another battleground in the larger dispute. For those sympathetic to Dee Dee Blanchard, the footage carried a different meaning. Rather than asking what the video revealed about one argument, they asked what similar conflicts may have looked like behind closed doors years earlier. If the public was willing to accept the possibility that Gypsy could become intensely emotional in adulthood, they argued why was it impossible to imagine similar tensions existing in the Blanchard household. This question does not prove any particular theory. It does not prove that Dee Dee was innocent. It does not prove that Gypsy was abusive, but it does challenge the simplistic image of a permanently passive and powerless daughter that often dominated earlier media coverage. The blanket video matters because it reminds viewers that every major figure in the case was more complicated than the public narrative allowed. The camera captured more than an argument, it captured uncertainty, and uncertainty remains one of the most overlooked elements of the entire case. And that's it. Chapter 13 was very short. Pancakes,
You are amazing.
you're up.
Cee Cee, you've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you all
thoroughly
for being
enjoyed.
here.
We love y'all so much.
This little cat is on it though. Every little angle, he's just like hitting every little nail on the head.
Yes, he did
Listen.
great. No doubt.
Thank you so much. That was a good read, y'all. I'm hooked on this book. Liam is an amazing writer. Like, he's 19 years old, but he is like such a wonderful writer. He writes with such empathy and insight and perspective. I love it.
Yes, he was great.
Hopefully, this will open up many doors for him.
Yes, we just need to share it out to everybody.
Yes.
Everybody needs to know about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you
So-
all for being
All right,
here.
Pam, how long we got?
Thanks for the taps, the gifts to the panel, and everything. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go
Yes.
to Pam Cakes. She's going to do 14 through the end of the book.
All right,
Pancakes. Thank you, Cee Cee. Thank you, Cee
All
Cee,
right,
so
we're
much.
going right
You're
over.
welcome. Thank
All
y'all
right.
for being here. Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Everyone take a potty break and get you a drink.
Yeah.
Thank
If we need to.
Yep. See y'all in a few.